Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. This is a fun talk, and I'm so glad that Steve Orlando introduced me to the Boulet Brothers. All three of them are going to take over editorial on heavy metal next month for the Halloween issue, which is fantastic. The Boulet Brothers, you may know, are the co-hosts of Dracula, a very fun show that has popped around on various platforms, but is now moving to Shudder starting in October. It's going to be a big month for the Boulet Brothers in October. Season 4 of Dracula. If you've never watched the show, Season 2 currently still available on Netflix. I don't know if everything is moving over to Shudder and AMC Plus, what exactly the deal is, but you can still watch Dracula on Netflix, and I absolutely recommend that you do, because it's a lot of fun. Drag competition along with a horror twist. These guys know their supernatural stuff. They also know their comics. It's really fun to talk to them about their favorite runs back in the day and what they're reading now. And it's really exciting to see what they're going to do in the pages of Heavy Metal and in Season 4 of Dracula. Steve Orlando and the Boulet Brothers on today's Word Balloon. This portion of Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Aftershock has some pretty cool stuff coming in the fall. First of all, in November, there's a really neat book coming up, and that's The Heathens. You're going to see a kind of great group of some of the most dangerous villains from history. People like Bumpy Johnson and Lucky Luciano and Sophia the Golden Hand and Billy the Kid, to name a few. This is going to be a great team-up book. It's Cullen Bunn and Heath Amadio, also illustrated by Sammy Kivella. Also coming up in September from Aftershock, we have 2 new series from some of my favorite writers and artists. Almost American from Ron Mars and Marco Costello. They Come from Russia with Love and Secrets, a great new spy story, Almost American. And The Search for Who, co-written by John Tsue and Steve Orlando. John, I hope I'm saying your name right. Artist Rubin. A nice Asian crime story, Search for Who, coming in September from Aftershock Comics. Go to their website and find out more information about some of the great titles from Aftershock. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages of art, and the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. This episode of Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex is a good friend. He's one of the preeminent comic book artists in the business. Beautiful paintings that are unlike anything else. I mean, paperback cover quality work. You know Alex's fantastic work on things like Marvel and DC, but also great film work on the Beatles and David Bowie and Monty Python and the Monkees. So much great stuff that is waiting for you in original art, lithographs, or prints if you go to the website alexrossart.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by my patrons and at Patreon, the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your great support, backing me, and enjoying Word Balloon and showing it through your subscriptions from Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. If you can afford $1 a month or something along those lines, the support is greatly appreciated. Thank you, as always, League of Word Balloon listeners. Well, we've got a full house on Word Balloon this afternoon as we're recording. Good to see Steve Orlando is back. Great to see you, Steve.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back.
And happy to welcome Swan and Drac Boulet, the Boulet Brothers of Dragula. Gentlemen, welcome to Word Balloon. It's really great to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much. Good to be here.
Absolutely, man. And congratulations. So we were just talking before we started recording. Dragula is moving to Shudder for season 4.
Yes, that's right.
That's awesome. And when do we know? Do we have a premiere date for season 4?
Yeah, so October 19th, the first episode will be out, and everyone's sort of clamoring at the bit to get to it, so we're really excited.
Absolutely, yeah. And every Tuesday night after that.
That's excellent. Oh, and that's great, man. It's not going to be right because it'll be on Shudder, so it won't be the entire season the way it's been on Netflix and stuff. We'll get episodes and everything. Wonderful, man. That's great. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Very, very cool. And of course, another reason why we're all talking is you're doing an issue of Heavy Metal, correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Wow.
Very exciting. Yeah, kind of like a legendary dream come true, right? Like heavy metal is like one of those titles that's just like, I don't know, I think it's ingrained in like subculture, and it's just an honor to kind of do it. And to have Steve as our wingman too. Like we came, we saw, and hopefully everybody loved what we did and conquered.
Yeah, I want to hear the genesis of first the heavy metal deal, and then I want to hear the origin of the Boulet Brothers. But first, let's talk about what's happening with the magazine and everything. How'd you guys get together with Steve?
So we've been fans of Steve's work, and I think he's been fans of ours as well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, did we start talking over social media? I don't remember.
I think we met through representation, actually, shared representation, if I'm going way back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean, and a shared friend in Phil Jimenez, who's been a judge on the show as well. Right. So I think that there were like awesome. Two vectors there.
Yeah,
I guess John didn't even know that too. But
I didn't know that, man.
On the show.
Wow, that's great, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we started talking with Steve, and we just started talking about comic books and all sorts of things, and we decided we wanted to do a comic together. And so we threw around a bunch of different ideas, and we thought, well, let's do this like heavy metal takeover issue because it's a Halloween issue. It's October, and so let's kind of get our feet wet and do that. And that's how it all started.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And also, obviously, it's great to hear that Jimenez has been a judge on Dracula and everything, and I love that because obviously it's such a visual show, and to have a guy like Phil that has created both creature and hero and villain in various forms of dress, so that seems to lend itself to what you guys do.
Well, we did like a super villain challenge. So the whole idea was to create your own super villain. And so we're like, who better to judge, a super villain challenge than Phil, who, arguably draws female characters very draggy in a way, right? It's very exaggerated, like giant cloaks and hair, and it's very diva-y looking, his approach to it. So I feel like he's the perfect judge for a challenge like that.
That's awesome. Now, and again, forgive my ignorance, guys. I'm assuming that the Boulet is kind of like a brotherly stage thing, if you will, if I'm correct, or a sisterly stage thing, if you will.
Yes, I guess that's the way you could describe it.
Well, I always like to say we're brother, lover, sister fuckers. It's just a kind of
I like it. Absolutely, man. Date, marry, kill. Is that the game? Again, old man talking here. You'll forgive me.
All of the above. All of the above.
So, how did you guys find each other? Seriously, in terms of like getting the act together, if you will.
I mean, we've known each other for years, and our paths crossed when we both lived in New York years ago. And then it was just sort of like, I like to say we started a conversation like years and years ago, and it just never stopped. So we moved cross country together, and we got involved with nightlife together, and and we've kind of crossed over, and now producing the show and traveling and appearances. And it's just been kind of a really natural progression for us.
Very, very cool. And I have to ask, because I've been in places like, God, I don't even know if the Red Baton in Chicago is still happening or not. I have to say I went back in the 90s. Where have you guys performed in Chicago? And if you have, what stages have you been on?
Actually, Chicago is one of the cities in the world that we haven't performed at for some reason. Yeah, it's weird. We've been all over the US many times. We've been to the UK many times, Australia. I mean, we've been everywhere, all through Europe. But for some reason, Chicago has evaded us. But we are performing in Chicago. I believe it's October 26th. It's a Tuesday. But we're performing there for the first time.
And what club are you going to be at?
I think it's Roscoe's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Terrific, guys. Seriously. And that's wonderful. Congratulations on that. Tell me about what you can, because I don't want you to necessarily spoil, but give us an idea of what we're going to find in your issue of Heavy Metal.
So, I mean, you're going to find a lot of our contributing friends writing and providing artwork for it. So we have some other drag characters from Drag Race that are friends of ours that are writing comic stories for the first time, and Steve's been helping them do that. We have Axel Caroline, who's an American Horror Story director, also a friend of ours that's contributing.
Cool.
Steve Fox is writing stories for it. So it's kind of like a big group effort, right? So we're pulling in people that haven't necessarily wrote their own comic stories before, but that, produce their own content and helping them make their first story, I guess I would say.
Are they stories, Steve, that are of the personas of some of the people that have been on Dragula and that are, kind of drag performers and stuff? Tell me about it.
I think they're stories that are going to surprise a lot of people. These are very evocative of each of the performers that are writing them. I'm not going to say that, we have a story from Katya, we have a story from Alaska, and they're going to be like Alaska and Katya appearing in the pages. Mm-hmm. I think that's almost what people expect. But I would say what we ended up doing is more that these are all like hyper like eccentric and exciting and blockbuster horror type visions of the themes that these folks sort of evoke. So if you know the type of character that Katya is, you know the type of story that Katya is going to be able to do, but you don't know like who's going to be in it. You don't know what's going to happen in it and so forth. But it's in her tone. You read it and you say, oh, this is very much a Katya story. It's provocative in the ways that she is. I would say the same for Alaska. I would say the same for Evie. Like we know, in talking to them between me, Drac, and Swan, what's important to these people as creators. And so we took those things and we worked with them to fashion these horror stories that are completely all new, completely surprising, but are still going to show you and say something, and say something that is right in the zone.
When you're ready.
Right in the strike zone of where all these creators are. So, like Drac and Swan alluded to, we have Alaska, we have Katya, we have Evie Oddly, we have Axel Caroline. We have Steve Fox, who, for folks may know if you follow James Tynan's Razor Blades, Fox is the co-creator of that, editor, and not to mention also co-writer with me on Rainbow Bridge from Aftershock, and and Party and Pray from Aftershock, two books that are diametrically opposed. And also my friend Danhausen, who is a very evil, very nice pro wrestler that is doing his first ever comic book story, who has essentially conquered wrestling and merchandising in the pandemic era. Couldn't be more excited to have him on there. So what I'm saying is you both know what you're going to get from these people, but you also have no idea because it's not the characters but it is going to be all new ideas that are dead set on the things that are important to them.
Sounds great, man. It sounds like you got a lot of really cool people doing the book. Swan and Drac, tell me, did you guys grow up on comics? Tell me about, if you did, some of your favorite comics, if you grew up on them, or even as an adult, if you've obviously become attracted to them.
I would say comics is probably the most influential form of media for me, like from when I was, growing up. Like, so this is like, I was a huge comic book collector and reader from a very young age. I probably still know the most obscure knowledge in the world about so many comic books. It's something that both of us were very interested in. It's actually part of how we met because I moved to New York and I started working for Harris Comics, which owned Vampirella, right when I got out of college. And that's where the two of us, we met while I was working there, and we started developing our own comics together and writing and drawing them and all this. And we never ended up doing anything with them because our careers and lives took a different turn. But we're both extremely interested in comics from then all the way to now. Yeah, we used to have a ritual, our Wednesdays where we go get the comics and then get lunch and just read and talk about it. It was, it was something that we did for years. So, and it was definitely something we bonded over too, because we both have like hyperactive imaginations. So it was just another outlet for us to just kind of like, geek out and really just, keep that kind of creative juices flowing. That's excellent. Drac, what did you do at Harris? I started off just interning, and then I started doing graphic design, and then I was kind of pitching my own stories on the side. So it's kind of like right out of college, that was my first job. That's excellent. And I'll even confess that Harris's prime was kind of my away from comics period in the 90s. I think I might be part of that last generation that grew up on comics,
And then, when I started doing, when I started dating and stuff like that, I dropped them for a while, came back late in college. And then in the 90s, I didn't have enough money to spend on comics. So I stayed away for a while and didn't come back until about 20 years ago. And but tell me, both of you and Steve too, obviously, but I mean, we've talked before. I don't know if we've really talked about your past, Steve, in terms of favorite heroes or villains or whatever. But, all of you, I'm interested in who your favorite characters were as you were reading.
I mean, for me, it switched all the time. Like I was a huge fan of John Ostrander's Suicide Squad.
Cool.
Massive fan of that. I still think it's one of the best, collected graphic novels to this day, those first 65 issues. I love the New Mutants for a while. I mean, honestly, everything obscure stuff, like the Defenders, when they went through that weird period where it was like the main X-Men had moved over to X Factor. So they brought in these weird B characters like Moondragon and Gargoyle and all this, I love that period because those characters were kind of expendable, right? When you have Iceman and like Phoenix and you're like, they're not going to kill them or do anything drastic with them. But when you're bringing in these oddball characters like the Defenders was and the Suicide Squad, it was exciting because, their head would get blown off at any moment.
Oh, yeah. It was super shocking, too, because I was just coming from a school of like, hey, I read all the X titles and, X-Force and X-Men and, kind of just maybe on the surface of comics. And then when I met Drac, he's like, here, read this. And it was just like the entire collection of the Suicide Squad. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So we're just like blowing people's heads off and killing people like left and right. It was kind of shocking, but it was also very politically charged. And I had never really read anything like that. So it left a big imprint on me, too.
I love like the Justice Society too. So there's that whole wholesome, I love that, like All-Star Squadron, all those sort of old books. I was a huge fan of those. And I liked when they were bringing them back around with James Robinson and all that. I guess that was like in the 2000s.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Early 2000s, JSA. Definitely. Yeah. And
I kind of got turned off like after, DC just restarted its universe 5 million times. I'm over it. I'm like, that's what chased me off of comics. Honestly, I was like, because I cared about their histories. I don't know much about the artists and the writers, but I know the characters, like the back of my hand. What issues were they in? What are their powers? What's their history? And so when they would just constantly screw with that, it was just a big turn off,
I do. I absolutely do. And then one of the casualties 10 years ago of the New 52 were the Justice Society. And I'm so with you, Drac. I mean, they were one of my favorite groups. And also, I would say with your eye for design, it really was the costumes of those Golden Age characters. I just thought they were so dramatic and it really were so distinct. And even just subsequent decades of the Silver Age and into the 70s and things like that, for some reason, those classic Golden Age looks were just, again, so theatrical and dramatic to me.
They were. I mean, even like I don't know if you were a fan of like Infinity Incorporated when that was happening. Yeah, it was like the kids of the JSA, which I love because, again, those were like weird characters and the villains, like the Harley Quinn and all that. Sure. It was a cool moment. But those costumes, they were like really kind of edgy for their time, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you had like Nuklon with his mohawk and stuff like that. No, I get it, man. I absolutely. That's terrific. And yeah, Steve, I don't know, man. Have we ever really delved into Golden Age or Silver or Bronze in terms of the old stuff that you liked maybe growing up?
I mean, it's possible we haven't even discussed it prior to this podcast, but I also was a big Justice Society guy. So maybe this all makes sense. Maybe this whole collaboration makes sense. It is kind of offensive that Drac called Moondragon what'd you say, a D-list villain? Or
at
D-list
the time, yeah.
Like, if that's what you think is D-list, I guess I really got to reevaluate.
Well, she wasn't like one of the heavy hitters of the Avengers. Like, she was a character that come in the Avengers for 2 or 3 episodes, and then they'd, they blame her for everything, and then she would leave.
Pretty much, yeah.
I want to say that Moondragon is like a big influence on our look, especially like last year where we had like
blocked eyebrows,
no eyebrows and black. We were completely skin bald and we had like a huge cowl and a long cape and it was very dragged out and amazing, like just like she is.
I mean, yes, she'll always be a B-lister to me. But no, I was big into Justice Society because I, got into comics. Well, we didn't have a comic store, right? So I mostly got into these characters through non-sport collectible trading cards in the early 90s.
Sure.
Although we did have flea markets. So I liked shit like Alan Scott, and then I really liked the West Coast Avengers because the reality is apparently, I didn't know this at the time, but they were not as popular as the presumed East Coast Avengers. So I was always finding that in the quarter bins and stuff at the at the flea market. But I loved it, So my first Marvel characters were like Mockingbird, Red, Michael Myers, Jumpsuit, Hank Pym, Moon Knight. There's an issue there where Hawkeye somehow beats Abomination, which I still remember to this day. Hellcat and Tigra, both very big for me. My first comic was West Coast Avengers 16, A Tale of Two Kitties.
Oh, yeah. I had that too.
I forgot about that one. That's great.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. And then now in my career, when I was in DC, they always thought of me as the deep cut guy. And, I guess it all makes sense. It all makes sense 30 years later.
And look at that too. All those West Coast Avengers stories now are what all these Marvel Plus shows are based on, right? The whole Scarlet Witch thing, and most of that stuff's coming out of those stories. So even though they were obscure at the time, it seems like, I think John Byrne wrote that whole Vision Quest, right? Where Scarlet Witch went crazy and the Vision was bleached all white and all that. Yeah.
We did. I was sure that Jim Hammond was going to be Vision's original body, but that's why I'm like the only person who probably likes Android Human Torch more than Johnny Storm.
Totally. I agree.
Yeah. I think there's room in the booth for the three of us as well, Steve. I am a massive Jim Hammond fan. Well, and I love the whole Invaders thing. And I really like that they're all World War II buddies. And I even when it was Zdarsky was doing an Invaders book, and where just recently in the last couple of years where Namor went nuts, and it really was like almost an intervention where Hammond and Cap are like, hey man, it's us, what are you doing? Like, we've known each other for 70 years, what the fuck's going on? And I love that kind of subtext that comes with. And the same with Justice Society. I would say that those characters are the same way, where it's like they've been through too much. It's like they can cut through the shit and really like talk to each other when they're in the right writer's hands.
The Submariner's like, actually, I've only known you for 2 days because they restarted our universe yesterday again, and I don't know who any of you are.
I understand. I can appreciate that. How about, I'm always interested, guys, and forgive me, but I am curious. I was talking to Matt Rosenberg last night, and one of my favorite Bronze Age, early 70s, it was always in the back of Lois Lane. And I don't know if this ever came across your guys' radar, but Rose and Thorn.
Yes. Yeah, it was Green Lantern's love interest.
Oh.
The mom of Jaden Obsidian.
Was she, was that right, Steve? I didn't remember that.
Yeah,
go for it.
Yes, it is right, but they have since introduced other versions of the character. But yeah, the one that can like do plant shit like Poison Ivy could or can now is Jaden Obsidian's mom, or maybe just one of their moms. I can't remember what the eventual reveal.
Right, I think
there has since been another one with like a split personality that is more of like a vigilante type that Gail Simone introduced or revamped, I can't remember. And then also Bendis made her immortal, so she was like a through character into Legion of Superheroes. But that's more contemporary. The original one, it was definitely at least one of Alan Scott's many. Well, now one of Alan's many beards, actually.
Well, yes,
but back then, one of his wives.
She also had a split personality, and I believe she committed suicide, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty German. It was like during that whole Infinity Incorporated era, they revisited Alan Scott. They were like, who's our mom? And so he's like, it's her. It's the Rose and Thorn. And she's like, has multiple personalities.
Right.
And he conceived Jaden Obsidian in this weird green magic bubble that floated over the city with the two of them making love. And that's how they got their powers, or at least that's how they explained it. Yeah.
That's awesome. So
that's also how I have sex, though. So like, I understand that.
Green bubbles. I respect that. Absolutely.
I did see that on Grindr.
So honestly, guys, what do you think of, and honestly, as individuals, what do you guys think of Alan Scott now as a bi character?
Oh, John, I think he's full gay, by the way, but I don't actually.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Excuse me.
But I'm not officially at DC anymore, so my word is not canon.
Okay, and I assumed, honestly, I mean, because I really haven't delved into it, but I assumed that given the fact that he had two children, that, you know, maybe he did have feelings for the women that conceived Obsidian and Jade, and figured he was bi, but I really don't know.
As a resident bisexual, like, that's obviously happens. You know, I don't know, but it's not the only option. So I don't know what their line is, to be honest. Like, because I'm a little out of date with my DC stuff. You might know that I've switched. I'm working for Coke now, not Pepsi.
I do know. Yes, indeed. We'll talk about what you got coming up, actually. Yeah.
But I did.
Well, at least the stuff that's on the record. But go on.
But I did think that the story that James told with Gary Frank and the Green Lantern 80th anniversary was very well done. And Drac and Swan, I don't know if you have seen it, and I purged it from my databanks here, so I can't send it to you. So I'm sorry, but I did think that sort of making him a closeted person in World War II, and having that be where his oath comes from, because he's the only one that has a different oath than all the other Green Lanterns. I thought it was really well done, you know, and the reality is that by saying that Justice Society was around, that a lot of people were closeted back in the 30s and 40s.
Certainly.
Especially because Alan is a radio executive and in a position of power. So I think it's a great story. I think it's funny because he was already my favorite Green Lantern before there were questions of his sexuality. Now it's like I went back in time and Kyle Reese that, but I didn't. It's just a happy accident. And I'm excited to see where it goes next.
The only thing I don't love about it is I loved the Molly Mayne Harley Quinn character, which was like his nemesis, you know. Yeah. And they eventually, like, you know, through these comics we're talking about, they got married and got all together and all this. And there was even this weird, you know, that like, what's that DC storyline where it was like Neuron or something, like was giving all the villains like new powers, like signing
that's Underworld. That's Underworld.
Yeah. So nice. she like sold her soul to become young again, and he had to go get her soul from hell. So there was this like long romance between them. So I don't know where that leaves that character, but I don't know. He always seemed like a gay to me. That's just what I think.
I think it's kind of interesting because he's an older hero, and a lot of older generations had to live that closeted life. Like for them, you know, the social environment and the social climate of the time didn't really allow them the freedom to be expressive or live openly as a gay person. So they'd often have these, marriages where maybe there, genuinely was love between, these older men and women of the time in like the 40s, 50s, and, so forth. And they would have they'd have to hide their sexuality. So in modern times, it's kind of, I think, really appropriate and cool to look back and say, hey, we have this older hero. He came from this time, and this is a way that someone who was gay had to live. And I think it just fits very well.
I'm with you guys both. In fact, because Drac, I'm with you in terms of the relationship Alan had with Harley Quinn Molly for all those years and the way it played out. And I won't deny that when James Robinson, when they did the New 52 in Earth 2, and Alan Scott of that Earth 2, I should say, was, younger and everything, and they made him gay. At first, I won't deny, my reflex was, well, why don't you create, a new gay character? Mm-hmm. But then when James did and explained to me what he was going to do with the 80-page giant story and moving forward, currently it's one of the main storylines of Infinite Frontier, the miniseries that Josh Williamson is doing. I agree with you guys. I think it is so excitingly eye-opening, and like that is a story that I want to read about one of the pillars of the DC universe, and all these stories where like he and Jay and Jay Garrick, they're the founders of the Justice Society. They are the elder statesmen that everybody looks at. What if one of them did have this like third identity that he had to worry about, even more so than protecting, the fact that he's Alan Scott and Green Lantern and everything? I think that's fascinating. And I really want to see stories from the 40s through modern age. I mean, they're dealing with it in the modern times, but I would love to see some 40s and 50s stories where that's part of the concern.
I think you can only be around Ted Grant long enough until you become like a little gay.
I would have guessed he was the gay, honestly, but that's.
I wrote that book as an original, actually, so I agree.
He seems like a DC, like an Eagle kind of character, to like the Eagle bar. He seems like a
leather guy.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is that's a reference that I feel like might go over John's head, and I'm excited for you to explain.
But welcome to see it sail over my head. I love it, guys. That's fantastic.
Gay biker leather bar. He's like literally is like a dude that you would see there.
See, in Chicago, there's a place, the Manhole, and
perfect,
self-explanatory. Right. So there you go.
Tell us about it.
One of our leather bars, yeah. So
how dare you?
And I must ask, guys, because my father told me this as a tavern owner. We were driving my sister to college, and on the way back, we were taking local roads as opposed to just jumping on the highway. And there was an upside down beer sign, and I was told that's code for that it's a gay bar.
Wow, I never heard that before.
No.
Guys, this was like literally early 80s, and my dad like, oh yeah, that means it's a gay bar. I'm like, oh, all right, and my dad was cool. My dad, I'm always very proud of my father. He had a gay couple as patrons, and he loved those guys, and he's like, and it was so eye-opening for him in the best way. And he's like, they're really good guys, they're just guys. It's all right. And he goes, they showed me pictures of their wedding. It was fascinating. And I'm like, waiting, like he was like coming back from like just seeing, a completely different people, a different lifestyle. And I was always so proud of him looking back. And it's like, yeah, way to go, Dad. You were, good for you, man. That was tough in the 80s,
I do. I'll tell you this, though, John. Next time we're going around Chicago, any weird shit I see, I'm just going to tell you that it means there's a gay bar around.
Well, you educated me on VCR cleaner. And I
I see, Steve. You had the poppers talk.
It's not my first time in the podcast, folks.
Very eye-opening. That's fantastic.
Literally, yeah.
I love it. No, I love it. And so yeah, over the
Certainly
years,
opening.
I mean, and forgive me, guys, because I know it was Pride Month just a couple months ago, but I'm trying to go over and not to limit you guys exclusively to gay characters or bi characters. I mean, are there was it yay as these as the universes opened up and they really started declaring various characters as LGBTQ and the like.
It's interesting because and I don't know, Steve, your experience in this, but to me, especially when I started working at Harris Comics, for example, and maybe it was it's Vampirella that I was working on, but I found it to be a very homophobic place back in the day, and I'm very happy to see that comics are less so now. This is something me and Steve had talked about before, like when we were growing up reading comics, there was like the New Guardians from DC, right? And it was supposed to be their sort of attempt at bringing diversity in to their books. And so, you had this Asian character that was a computer, and it was just very like it's like good try but kind of offensive at the same time, right? Because they had like this Estrano, which was like their gay character, who subsequently catches AIDS basically within like 2 issues, and it's sort of like good attempt but like drop the ball,
Sure. Yeah.
It was fun to see like Steve worked on that character and sort of revamped it for today's audiences. And I thought that was really cool because I felt like at the time it was like you didn't see a lot of characters you could relate to as a gay person back then. And so that was a little disappointing. And then when you did see representation, it would be treated in a way like that. So to see someone like Steve and these companies be open to it, to redevelop these characters and introduce more characters as queer that you didn't know. It's definitely refreshing to see.
Steve, I know we've talked about your work on and what's his name again? Forgive me. That character.
You're going to have to Extraño, you mean? I was going to say, I mean, I've done many a queer character, John.
Well, that's true. Of course, Midnighter and forgive me. I'm not coming up with the list right now, Steve.
Don't worry because it's right here. No, I mean, look, I didn't create Midnighter. Actually, that was
no, but you've worked on him. You certainly worked on him.
But I did, so we did the rework of Extraño / Gregorio de la Vega because apparently his name itself was a slur in South America for queer people.
Wow.
I didn't know. But we did. So we did Janet Falls, Firebrand, Neon the Unknown. Those were both new queer characters I did in Unexpected. I mean, a ton of new ones in Midnighter, since we surrounded him with different types of queer folks. We also, I mean, I brought back Judo Master's gay son in Supergirl. We did a new bisexual love interest, Ben Rubel. Oh wait, that's actually that was actually a plan in the future that didn't have to happen yet. Oops. I planned to make her boyfriend bisexual. Freudian slip there now that I've left the company. And but what else did I do? And then at Marvel, of course, I just created. I mean, and there's others in DC, but at Marvel, of course, I just created Somnus for the Marvel Pride issue, and he's going to be appearing in some future comics that I'm working on starting next year as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, I mean, the thing with it's funny actually. I tell the story a lot about when it comes to Gregorio / Extraño. You know. As Drac pointed out, he was relatively stereotypical and flamboyant in the 80s. And, you know, this was already 7 years ago that I revamped him. Well, 6 years ago. And at the time, like, you know, I was still a young idiot as well when I was working on that. So I took him and I basically just made him like Doctor Strange meets the Dos Equis man if he liked penis. And that was the revamp. They're like, oh, Steve made him into a daddy and all these things. Which, you know, whatever. I gave him a beard and better fashion sense, and so did Fernando Blanca, who designed him. But the funny thing is, since then, I myself have evolved, and I made him. You know, my reaction to how stereotypical and flamboyant he was to essentially strip him all of those things and just make him this interesting guy at a bar that, you know, will have sex with you. But isn't necessarily that evocative of certain parts of queer culture. And I've learned since then in my own life that, you know, folks who tend to represent themselves in ways that are not as stereotypically masculine or cisgendered or quote unquote straight acting, like in many ways, in almost all ways, that's an even braver way to enter the world. It's more dangerous. You attract more attention, and there's an incredible strength to that. So I did my revamp of him, and now I almost feel like I want to do another one or have another creator do or rework him again, because there is of course a happy medium between where he was and where he is now that is also very true and very powerful. And I've learned that in the time since I did that. And meeting different types of people and getting out of the asshole of upstate New York. So I'm very proud of that. And I also think I wouldn't have done it the exact same way if I were doing it now as 2021 Steve, because I've learned a lot. And, you know, like most people, I was real stupid in my 20s. So I'd like to do a better job or a different job, at least, if I got another chance.
I understand. Swan and Drac, are there other established characters that, you know, you'd be like, oh man, if I were writing this, you know, here's a clearly gay character or bi character or whatever that you know, they
oh my god.
Well, look, comics are weird, right? Because if you like, okay, I was a huge fan of comics forever, but I did step away from it from a while. And when you do, and then you look at it objectively with fresh eyes, you're like, okay, so these are like these super jacked guys who are very beautiful with square jaws who only hang out with each other and wear the tightest clothes possible. I'm like, they're gay. You know what I mean? Like, that's like just coming back to it, you're like, half of these people must be gay, you know, like, because that's just what it seems like. So, I mean, God, if there's any characters in particular, I think Captain America should be gay. That's my opinion.
You know, honestly, man, when the Cap needs a boyfriend hashtag was running around in I think the early days of the Marvel films, I'm just like, yeah, all right.
You know, I'm not a fan of like turning all these established characters queer, but Captain America, I'm like, you're gay. Like, you are gay. That's just so funny.
No, I appreciate the observation, but and again, guys, I hope I'm not being offensive because I just as a young man, I was always like, wow, I never saw that. I'm like,
but think about it, you know, like
I love the constant refrain of, like you guys just said, well-nestled guys, very tight clothes. They're all hanging out. It's like, yeah, I guess.
Look, everybody, like all straight and queer people have different preferences and everything. And I'm not saying, you know, like obviously there's a lot of straight men that take good care of themselves. However, like, you know what I'm saying? When you look at them in the comics, it really verges on porn in a way.
It's like it's completely homoerotic in many ways.
Yeah.
I'm hurt by no. Again, I can appreciate the observation, and sadly, anecdotally, is all I've got. But speaking to my gay friends who are like, "Oh, come on," and I'm like, "All right."
Or like
cool.
Wonder Woman, right? You're like, how do you? Okay, so you're on this island with nothing but women, and you haven't seen men for thousands of years. I'm like, do the math, you know?
Absolutely, man. No, you're 100% right about that. You're absolutely right about that.
One character that I like, a female character that I've been a fan of kind of forever in the movies too and stuff. And I read her like solo title or whatever you call it for a while. Wasn't very good, or at least to my liking, is Mystique. You know, I kind of love her. And, you know, Drac kind of educated me about, I think her lover or her mother or something, like Destiny was a character in the...
Yeah, it was her partner.
Her partner, right? And they had like this.
That's her wife. That's also a big plot point right now.
Okay, yes, but I guess it was back in the day too, right?
At one point, yeah, they alluded to it, and then they finally made it real. Yeah,
yeah, which I just thought was like a very interesting thing to like a whole world would open up at the possibility of that relationship because she's a shapeshifter, and you know, just expanding on that. What that could do like in their relationship and how it reflects to identity. And even something you said earlier, I think in reference to Alan Scott, which is, oh, maybe he had like this third identity, which is the way that I viewed my own sexuality, like growing up. And I think a lot of people do. When you live a closeted life, it's kind of like a secret life. It's very much like a secret identity. But if you could shapeshift too, like I think it just adds a whole another dimension of possibility in a queer sense.
You're right. Absolutely, man. How about, have you guys, were you guys reading Gail Simone's Secret Six? Because I really thought Vandal Savage's daughter was an incredible character. And I even loved how Bane, the Batman villain, really I think loved her on a certain level. And she knew that and was very, I think, and again, this was my interpretation of the relationship, very gentle with his devotion to her. And knowing that, look, sorry, it's not going to happen. But by the same token, she's like, Jesus, this guy is really literally will take a bullet for me and stuff. And I don't know if you guys, all three of you, if you had that observation with that weird relationship.
I didn't pick up on that. I think at the time I was just I actually really was into the Secret Six and read the Secret Six. That was kind of one of those kind of little offshoot titles that lasted for a minute, but was actually kind of cool and really fun. Very much in the same vein as what we were just talking about earlier with Amanda
Suicide
Waller.
Squad.
Yeah, the Suicide Squad. Yeah.
Totally.
No, I don't know about that.
Well, the same DNA for sure. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah, I'm with Swan on that one, Drac.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't get into Secret Six. I think it was just very two different writing styles to me. Similar characters, but yeah, I don't know. Wasn't my thing.
That's fair. Steve, I don't know. Did you ever think about Scandal Savage and the way they presented, the way Gail specifically presented her?
I mean, I think Gail did a really good job in that series. For me, it's always going to be the initial, the Scandal and Bane thing you're talking about happened in the Nicola Scott second series. For me, it's always going to be, if you want to talk about a character revamp like I did with Gregorio, her work on Thomas Blake, Catman, took basically a joke character, her and Del Eaglesham, and made him into, a bi icon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone I never got to write, by the way, at DC, that I still would if I ever get the chance. But that first series for me was easily the high point. And I say that as obviously Nicola did amazing work on her run as well. She's also essentially Wonder Woman herself, so I don't want her to find me and push me into a small box.
I know.
But I did love. I thought it was impressive character work with Scandal, and even more so, I was there for Thomas Blake, going right back to the first issue of that Eaglesham run with her, because it was a very real story. He hit rock bottom, and then he decided that he could either die there or really reinvent himself. And I think that through a superhero lens, that's a place we've a lot of us have been. So I was a big fan, especially of that initial run.
Agreed. Me too. I think that's awesome. By the way, has anyone co-opted for the bi community BiCon for a t-shirt or like, I mean, are there bisexual icons that are bicons, you know,
appearing on my Threadless store within the next hour and a half?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Outstanding, man. So back to Dragula, the show. What do you guys want to tell us about the upcoming fourth season that you can spoil?
I mean, I'll say it's definitely the best season of the show to date. It sort of takes the best qualities of all the previous 3 seasons and cuts out some of the unnecessary stuff and just combines those great elements into an amazing season. It's just fun. You know, season 1 was kind of a little more punk and we brought that back. Season 2 was a little more camp and fun.
Sure.
And we brought a lot of that back too. And the characters that we cast were a lot less politically correct on season 2. So, you know, they didn't care about offending people. That was their job, to offend each other all day, which is amazing reality TV to watch, you know? Season 3,
and you hired James Majesty, who like maybe slept with his brother. So like you.
Well, nice. I mean, and that's the thing of like he perpetuated that, even though it wasn't.
I was going to say I'm joking. I'm just trying to theorize that.
Well,
we love those controversies.
Yeah, and so season 3 was like they were more politically correct and sensitive, which was extremely annoying. So we left all that in the dirt. And but there was some horror in season 3 that we really liked. So we brought all those elements together for season 4, and it's spectacular. I really just can't wait for everyone to see it. It's dramatic. It's very creative. It's a fun ride.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It's fun.
I was actually going to jump in front of John and say I wanted you guys to talk about the Resurrected special, because I really think it is worth, for people who don't know or for John who doesn't know, by many vectors for you to talk about it. Because, and I'm going to prompt you, obviously, because this is my question. I mean, one, you ended up shooting a pandemic special that essentially works. I mean, it has no real signs of that. I think like you sort of like humbled anyone else shooting television during the pandemic. So I'd love for you to tell people about that. Yeah. And as well, I think the philosophy behind Resurrected is really cool, you know, like, and you can get into if you want to spoil it for people or not, but the prize at the end, I think, is really evocative, having known you guys for a couple of years, about the way you see art and the way you see your craft, in that, you know, what you get at the end of Resurrected and where you land versus what you don't get, which is, you know, essentially your own special prize for having not won a season of the show. But maybe I'm projecting. I think that it's a really great thing that you guys did, and really stand out for people who maybe have only ever seen drag in other shows that will remain nameless. It's very different, and I'd love for you both to talk about it a little bit.
Well, I want to jump in and say thank you, first of all, because you know, you recognize it for what it is, and for us, it was a way that we could continue to make and create queer content during like this really crazy and stressful time. But we just adapted to the surroundings, and we're still able to do that. You know, I think a lesser bitch would have been like, I'm not just going to do anything. I'm just going to wait this out. But we were like, absolutely not. And you know, one of the tenets that we push on the show is, you know, if you're subversive, if you're provocative and strange, irreverent and weird, like, so are we. So put that to level 10. Like, we want that front and center, you know? So when the pandemic struck, we were like, God, you know, it's just not even, I couldn't even consciously bring competitors here to LA to film. And we kind of, you know, marinated on that thought for a minute. And I think Drac probably was like, because Drac's always the button pusher. Drac was probably like, well, why don't we just go to them? And at first it's like shocking, but then it was like, yeah, why don't we just go to them?
It took a minute. Yeah. Cause everyone on the team, there's like a core team of us, and everyone was like, this is how it always goes with me. Everyone immediately says absolutely not. And then I wait, and then I'm like, okay, is it starting to work? Is it starting to seep into their brains? Like, who's going to come on my team and start to say, yeah, we can actually do this? And luckily everyone came around.
Yeah. So the whole premise was, you know, there are other shows that do that revisit, you know, their all-star casts, or the winners and all the people that everyone loved. But sure. I'm not really seeing very many opportunities for people that maybe went home too early, you know, they're losers, if you will, like, to give them a revisit and like, hey, what would happen if these people that maybe didn't do their best their first time up at bat, what if they were given another chance? And this was the idea of the resurrection. So we chose 7 monsters from previous seasons that we felt had a lot of potential and revisited them in their own home, in their own hometowns. during the pandemic. So it was a little bit of a time capsule of our country and what was happening, because we went from everywhere from the Southwest to the Southeast up to North Carolina and across and Phoenix and everything, and filmed them in their own environment and had them compete almost kind of remotely, where we were able to feature their performances in like 3 different distinct kind of Halloween themed challenges and choose one of them to basically come back from the dead. Like, cause we kill off our competitors when they lose in whatever given season. So we resurrected them, and the winner of the resurrection special, which also appeared on Shudder, as our first original with them, has been secured their slot as one of the monsters competing on season 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's really cool to hear you guys go to them. I've been talking to others that have produced television during the weird months, and obviously we're, I guess, still in them to a degree. But Brian Volk-Weiss, who's a great, he's been doing a lot of shows about toys and stuff. He actually sent out camera packages to the various toy stores that he was going to and had them shoot their own footage and then send it back to him, and they cut stuff together. But I mean, it's pretty guerrilla for you guys to go out there and do it yourself during the thick of things. That's amazing.
Well, that's like at our base, we are creators. Like, we are content creators, whether it be comic books or TV or, live events. Like, that's what we love to do. So a challenge like that is right up our alley, because we also like to do things in a non-traditional way. That's how the whole show started. It wasn't like we're like, hey, major networks, we have this concept, monster drag artists, and we're going to make them do crazy Fear Factor things, and then we're going to kill them at the end. Like, pitching that to somewhere would never work. So it was very much like, we know this will work. They don't. We're smarter than them. So let's just make it, and then they'll come to us. And that's basically what happened. So doing something like Resurrection, it was risky, because again, we sort of put our ass on the line and we're like, I hope this works. And luckily it did. But it was exciting, and it definitely passed some time for us that could have been very boring just waiting out things here.
Sure. When did you guys start your concept and everything?
It was right in the middle of, like, it was when the country was the most locked down.
Oh, no, I realized with Resurrection, but even prior to that, like, I mean,
Dracula.
Again, Dracula. When did Dracula start?
Dracula. Go ahead, Drac.
No, you go ahead.
Dragula started as a nightlife event in like 2015. We did it at like an underground punk leather bar in the east side of LA every month. Okay. And it was like sold out, packed to the rafters, like wall to wall queerdos, like in mosh pits. And we had a pageant where we celebrated the ugliest bitch in the room, basically. And we would make them do crazy stuff like lip sync out of trash cans, and we made it rain inside the club. And we had a Divine challenge, the drag queen Divine challenges, John Waters challenges. And we did it in Brooklyn, we did it in Austin, and we did it in San Francisco. And we realized that like everywhere we take this thing, there are covens of weirdos that just absolutely love this concept. And I think our first night we did it, we looked at each other, and of course everyone told us it wouldn't work. And it was like packed with a line around the corner. We were like, this has a life force. Like, this has an undeniable like presence and power. We want to make this a TV show. I think we had that conversation night number 1.
Yeah, it was the first night. It was after the first night we were like, this needs to be a reality show. Yeah. And so we started working towards making that happen.
I'm shaking my head in terms of, just that's fantastic. And man, I'm telling you, I know there's a lot of shitty people still out there, but it seems to me, and forgive the observation because you guys are more in the know and in the community, it seems like it's as much as it's moving slowly, that it is getting better as far as acceptance and appreciation.
I'll say something interesting about that is it is. And then on another side, unexpected side effect of that is that the community almost starts to turn on itself a little bit,
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's almost like it gets so politically correct that you can't even exist anymore, and so it's sort of like the bigger picture of just general acceptance for queer people is sort of a given now. Now it's these, it seems like every couple of months it gets a deeper cut. And I don't know, it's a weird infighting, I feel like, that happens now that I hope will go away.
I mean, I think, what the best example of this, and something that'll be easiest for our like, I feel like you're basically in every version you're talking about no kink at Pride, which was the controversy of this year.
Okay.
You know, for John's benefit, which is, you know, to say like, you know, Pride used to be, I mean, the first one was a riot. It was a rebellious event, and it's supposed to be subversive and unnerving and this sort of like primal expression of freedom. And it's oftentimes, I mean, that involves sexuality, and sexuality involves sex. But now I think an extreme version of what Drac is talking about, you have younger generations, and I'm talking folks that haven't even really struggled in many vectors, usually teenagers, you know, like who have a relative level of privilege to folks even my age, you know, like who never had a gay straight alliance in high school, who barely had one in college, you know, like and don't have the sort of like ubiquity that a lot of folks have now. And it has turned into like this form of like reactionary internal conservatism, right? Where you have people who don't really know what parts of our culture really stand for or how they've been earned, that are rejecting parts of it. You know, what folks that are saying that, well, if they see two guys hooking up at Pride, well, that's violence towards them. But it's also privilege, you know, to even be able to do that, to be able to be at Pride, to have Pride, which is earned through those types of protests and actions and things like that. So I do see some of what Drac is saying, and it's probably not unique to our community. I'm sure it happens with a lot of different marginalized folks, but it is certainly. I think it is a sort of a modern issue where folks lack the context to really understand, you know, how hard we fought for some things within our lifetimes. You know,
exactly.
Because it wasn't within theirs.
You couldn't get health insurance as a queer person or marry each other. These were big things. And so now that those things are almost a given, I think younger generations that don't understand how people like us had to struggle to make those things happen lack an appreciation for it, I think, because it's automatically given to them. And yeah, it's a weird catch-22.
I want to chime in here too, because I think there's another element that really kind of like just ticks me. It just gets me, which is like the society that we all live under is like heteronormative by all measures. So, you know, things that are subversive in the gay, you know, being gay or being queer in any way is kind of subversive by nature. But the way that we live is sort of in oftentimes opposition, or it creates a lot of discomfort for, like, you know, the straight society at large that we live in. But when you see, you know, queer people out in their kinky gear and they kind of promote their version of what their healthy sex life looks like, that kind of puts the subversion in people's faces. It's meant to make people uncomfortable, but, you know, to whitewash it and to make it acceptable, like no kink at Pride, it's kind of like, fuck off, because we're not here to make people comfortable, you know. And it's the same thing with drag. A lot of times you see drag by nature is like radical self-expression. It's a clash against the norm. It's a clash against societal expectations, and just, you know, sometimes a lot of times just law or inequalities. It's a way to express discontent with those kind of big issues. But when drag up to this, before Dragula, I'll say, at least on a huge platform, we see it very whitewashed, very safe, very pretty, very family friendly. And Dragula is not that. It's meant to kind of clash against the norm. And it reminds me of this phrase that I really love. It's like, we're not gay as in happy, we're queer as in fuck you.
I'm hip.
It's not asking permission to be accepted. It's telling you, I have a place here and you're going to move over and give it to me, or I'm going to take it. And maybe I'll take a couple inches from you too.
No, I am glad that things are opening up and getting more, you know, hey, this is who I am, deal with it. And it's cool. I mean, again, I as a middle-aged white guy, hetero and stuff, it's like, no, man, go. You know, it's like, it's cool. Everything's fine, you know.
For us, I think of the mantra of the Boulet Brothers is sort of, to encourage everybody to be themselves 100%. Yeah. Like whether you're straight, queer, bi, whatever it is, just be you. And especially if you're an artist, like express yourself without restraints. Like our society puts so much restraints on us that, you know, our message just doesn't appeal to queer people. It's everybody. It's like, just, you know, shuck off what people expect of you and live a life that makes you feel happy and fulfilled.
All right. My one question about the heavy metal issue, because again, it was always one of my favorite things as an adolescent reading heavy metal. Any robot boobs in the issue?
There's definitely a lot of boobs. I don't know that there are particularly robot ones.
All right, fair enough.
I know there's some extraterrestrial memories. There's some undead memories. I don't know about
fantastic.
I mean, the
Halloween theme, so you know,
the issue hasn't gone to press yet, John. So you know, we'll see.
All right, but it comes out. I'm assuming, obviously, Halloween month, right?
Yeah, we're right before Halloween, so we are pretty much wrapped up. We will be on time for retailers listening. Have no fear, but we're not totally finalized. If I can slip some automaton breasts in there for you, I'll see what I can do.
I appreciate that.
You almost said it. Automaton titties is like
exactly. We need the alliteration. Absolutely.
I'm the nice one on this podcast. You know, I'm like,
Steve, what do you got? I know, again, you made it clear you're in the Marvel camp now and you've got some cool stuff coming up. What can you tell us about that's public?
Oh, man. Well, so just on stands this month, actually, is the collection of my Magneto and the Mutant Force one shot, which is in the Heroes Reborn, America's Mightiest Heroes. I'm looking at it from across the table here, which I did with Bernard Chang, my first ever venture into the X-Men universe. Hopefully not my last, if the fates align, if destiny is there, like Drac was talking about. But the big thing is, finally, Kian Tormey and I have Darkhold coming out, which is this big Scarlet Witch and Doctor Doom book. That starts in September and is going to run right through a series of 5 one-shots featuring nightmare versions of these Darkhold defenders, these heroes, and then have this big blockbuster horror action bookend issue that Kian's also drawing at the end with Darkhold Omega. And he's just knocked that art out of the park. It's this final showdown between Wanda and Chthon, and it's just like, it's been a super exciting event to put together, even though it was on hold for the pandemic for a little while. For folks who read Milk Wars, speaking of mammary glands and alien mammary glands, for folks who read Milk Wars, it's very much that type of book. So the bookends will tell one massive story, and then you'll get character focused one shots in between that fit right between those bookends. But you do get a complete story if you hypothetically only read my bookend issues. But you shouldn't do that because the one shots are amazing. Alec Packnadell's doing one, Ryan North is doing one, Jordi Belair is writing one, Kibble Smith is writing one, and then Mark Russell. So it is a murderer's row of writers who are smarter than me and are going to make me look like I know what I'm doing, and I'm very excited for it. And, you know, as for what's next, keep an eye on January solicits. I have just turned in probably the biggest script of my career. I can't really say what it is yet, but man, those solicits are coming soon. And you guys will all know as soon as Marvel puts out their January books.
That's awesome, man. And I'll certainly welcome you back when that stuff becomes public. Swan and Drac, if DC and Marvel were to open their coffers to you guys and offer any characters, who would you guys want to write?
I secretly want to rewrite Dr. Druid, a really obscure character, even like in a weird little 5-issue, like weird Tales kind of comic or something. I'd love to fix that character because I think he got really fucked over. And I wouldn't mind taking a crack at some of the characters from the Suicide Squad that haven't been brought into like the modern day, like Nightshade and some people like that.
Sure.
Very cool. Very cool. I guess I don't know why, but I know that if Drac was going to be doing that, I'd be like the consulting contributor there, as we do in everything. But I also like the idea of putting a shine on some villains that could use, a little more love, I guess, at least in my opinion. And two that I kind of just sticking out in the moment are Cersei, a Wonder Woman villain that just goes back to mythology, which I think could be like really cool to explore, as well as Solomon Grundy, who I have like a kind of a secret love for, and I think could be really interesting.
Well, man, would you glam him up the way they did Lobo for 5 minutes? And it was like, did you see Pretty Boy Lobo for?
I did not.
Man, it was like, all right, guys, Lobo's Lobo. All right, what are you doing? I mean, really,
I thought it was his kid. I didn't realize that was the same character.
No.
Steve, I don't
just
remember.
To step in, they had Lobo has a daughter too, but there was Hot Lobo for a while.
Yeah,
which is what
Lobo.
John
Some
is
people would
talking
say
about.
Lobo was always Hot Lobo, but that depends on your preference.
Well, correct.
Yeah.
This was. I mean, Lobo went from being like Tom Ford's Alien Bounty Hunter to being like Timothy Chalamet in space.
Yeah.
And that happened. But he does have a queer daughter named Crush now, and I'm a big fan of Crush. But no, that Hot Lobo, Twilight Lobo, as he was also called, was eventually revealed to be an imposter. And I'm pretty sure real Lobo came back and cut his head off and put it on a jar somewhere before I wrote him in Justice League of America. It really remains to be seen. That was a long time ago. But he had his moment. Like Twilight Lobo had his moment, and then he got beaten up by the real one. So
which is good.
Another series for DC I think would be fun is to revisit the Manhunters, like for that Millennium crossover back in the day. Yeah. That was such a fun story. I'd love to see someone do something with that again.
I agree. I'm a big fan of the predecessors to the Green Lantern Corps, according to that was old DC continuity. God only knows what they're doing now with the old robot Manhunters. So,
yeah. Well, it's cool to see how they had those, characters that we all knew and loved for years that were secretly Manhunter agents, and they were all trying to bring about this Doomsday event. It was a cool story. I'm
with you, man. Too funny, gentlemen. I really appreciate you talking with me today. I'm very excited for all of your projects coming up. Again, look for the Heavy Metal Halloween issue that is curated and, with contributions as well by Orlando and the Boulets. And that'll be great. And then also coming in October on Shudder, season 4 of Dracula. So, is there a hard premiere date for Dracula?
Yes, October 19th.
Excellent. Very, very cool. As always, very educational, Orlando. I appreciate you opening my eyes, and as I learn and truly appreciate the education I get every time we talk. And Swan and Drac, seriously, my pleasure. Please come back. You guys are absolutely welcome back. I really appreciate individual creators of content and what you guys, and as a team, what you guys are doing is fantastic. And it's truly. I don't want to sound like, I'm looking at you guys under a microscope, but it's fascinating. And I think it's great. Real fast, real stupid question I meant to ask earlier, because, the drag stuff is so visual. Audio podcasting, is there a place for that in what you guys do? Yeah, so we have a podcast, the Boulet Brothers Creatures of the Night, which is a horror podcast. Guys. Yeah, no problem. It's
good that you asked.
Yeah, it's I think it's been going on for maybe like a year and a half now. It's pretty popular. We talk about horror movies, we interview different horror celebrities, and we do it's almost like a little bit of a 1940s throwback because we do like scary stories at the end and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. Oh, that's wonderful. Man, I just started this year a show called Kinescope where my buddy Gabriel Hardman and I are looking at live TV from the 40s. Starting in the 40s and going through like the early 60s before they had videotape. And a lot of stuff was all those anthology shows that were performed live back in the day. So, no, that's great. And I'm a massive, Inner Sanctum, suspense, old time radio. I mean, horror was so made for audio. Yeah. And that's really cool. And I'm glad you guys are doing that. Are you aligned with a network? Are you guys doing this independently? Right now, it started with Fangoria magazine, and that they had like a sale that happened, and we moved over to Dread Central, so that's who we're with currently. Oh, very cool! Excellent. Yeah. The title again for your podcast? It's the Boulet Brothers Creatures of the Night. Awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, everybody listening, Boulet Brothers Creatures of the Night, definitely check that out. Check out the issue of Heavy Metal, and check out Dragula starting October 19th on Shudder, a new home for the Dragula and the Boulet Brothers. That's wonderful. Steve, Swan, Drac, thank you so much for coming on. And again, you guys are all welcome to come back anytime you've got something new to talk about.
I would love to. Finally, someone to talk to comics about.
Yeah, this was really fun.
Comics with.
Thank you so much for having us. This was really fun.
Thank you, John.
Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics. June is jumping in Aftershock. Lots of great stuff. Astronaut Down from James Patrick. Also Mark Sable and Alberto Locatelli's Where Starships Go to Die. Some amazing sci-fi action this month from Aftershock Comics. In addition to that, you've got A Calculated Man from Paul Tobin and Alberto Albuquerque. Really, really great stuff. In addition to those great comics that are dropping this month in June, we've also got the graphic novel collection of Chicken Devil, Under Pressure. That's Volume 1. Brian Bucoletto and Hayden Sherman are your creative team. If you like Breaking Bad, you will love Chicken Devil, a fantastic crime comic from Aftershock Comics. In addition to that, we've got Nick Santera's Naughty List coming at the end of the month. And to start things off in July, my buddy Ed Brisson is back with a brand new story, There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd. Issue 1 hits that first week of July. All this coming up from Aftershock Comics. Don't take my word for it. Check it out on their website. You'll find preview pages of art and caption of the story, and the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop, all happening at AftershockComics.com. This episode of Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Coming up in the later part of the summer or early fall, from Abrams and Marvel, it's Fantastic Four, Full Circle, written and illustrated by Alex Ross. It's a rainy night in Manhattan. Not a creature is stirring except for the Thing, Ben Grimm. When an intruder suddenly appears inside the Baxter Building, the Fantastic Four find themselves surrounded by a swarm of invading parasites. These creatures, composed of negative energy, come to Earth using a human host as a delivery system, but why? Fantastic Four has no choice but to journey into the negative zone. Great story, great creator, as you know, Alex Ross. Really excited for this project. He's been working on it for a really long time. And, man, you are in for some spectacular images. And if you want to get a preview for this, all you need to do is go to Alex's website, AlexRossArt.com. It's there. Also, as always, amazing paintings, sketches, lithographs, posters, every price point, epic images. You know the name. Check it out, AlexRossArt.com. Word Balloon is brought to you by my listeners. You are the sponsors of Word Balloon, the League of Word Balloon listeners, via subscriptions monthly to Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. Hey, couldn't do it without you, honestly, League. I truly appreciate your support. I appreciate your devotion, your listenership, and your patronage, honestly. You know, if you can even spare $1 a month, it's greatly appreciated. It helps me make these terrific shows, go to conventions where I'm not sponsored, and, keep networking and making interesting programming, hopefully for you to enjoy every month here on Word Balloon. But I couldn't do it without you. Thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners. Again, if you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, for as little as $1 a month, all you need to do is go to patreon.com/wordballoon, WORDBALLOON. And again, I really appreciate your patronage, subscription, and attention, all of you, the League of Word Balloon listeners. Until next time, thanks a lot for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2022. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.